So I've recently been introduced to MiNET. This is a server software that is for Minecraft Bedrock Edition clients. So Android, iOS, Windows 10, Nintendo Switch, things of that nature. This server software is intended to try to handle clients from all of those different aspects. And some of you may be already familiar with PocketMine, which works pretty well and is a very popular software. But MiNET has some very specific features that are very beneficial to have. One, it's fairly quick because it's written in C# and delivered across .NET Core. The other thing that is really significant for this software is that it does on-the-fly conversion for Java worlds to be compatible with Bedrock Edition clients, and that's a really big thing for a lot of people. Most specifically, that means that you can generate up worlds that were intended for Java Edition servers or Java Edition clients using all of the pre-built existing world generation or world editing tools for the Java servers and run it on a Bedrock server, which for any server owner, that's a huge benefit, huge plus. The biggest thing that is the downside to that is because that was such a big primary target for MiNET, they do not support any Bedrock Edition worlds. So if you have any pre-built worlds for PocketMine or from your Bedrock Edition clients, those worlds will not properly convert when sending them to the client. You'll have the same type of issues that PocketMine has when trying to send worlds that were generated in a Java Edition environment to regular clients, where you have block IDs that aren't the same, blocks don't show up correctly, or sometimes not at all. So with MiNET, if you're using Java worlds and you have a reason for using Java world editing tools, then this may be a good solution for you. And I'm going to kind of walk through some of that real quick and show you what that looks like a little bit. So the other reason for really kind of making a video on this is because during the process of learning a little bit about the MiNET server, I came across the fact that the documentation for this stuff isn't really clear or very solid for helping someone kind of get started with this. And so I wanted to share my experience a little bit and some of the preferences that I have for doing this and hope that it helps some other people. So to get started, you're going to go to the GitHub repo for MiNET, which is github.com/NicholasOlofsson/MiNET. I'll put a link in that below. And then from here, there are some things that we need to kind of pay some close attention to. One is this link right here, which takes us to AppVeyor. I'm going to open this in a new tab, and we're going to go check this out here in just a minute. And then the other part is the wiki. In the wiki, there's some documentation that isn't entirely up to date and could probably use some improvement. There's no probably to it. It definitely needs a little bit of help, especially considering the fact that they've recently undergone some significant changes and some of this stuff hasn't been kept up with that yet. That may change in the future. Some of the things that I found most interesting are the fact that under the getting started process, this is really targeted more towards developers and not really so much for server owners. This process, if you follow it, will have you download a copy of the source code directly from the repository instead of one of their pre-built version tracked binaries, and then run your own process of building a copy of the source code and running from your own builds. If you're trying to run a server, you're not going to want to have to do that on a regular basis, and it makes it very difficult for plugin developers who are working with you to properly keep up with where they're at in the development phases. So I'm going to kind of walk you around some of those problems. First thing that's most important is that you need .NET Core 2.1 installed on whatever platform you are running this on. I know that the server software runs on Linux and it runs on Windows 10. I haven't had any problems on either of those platforms. I have not been able to test on a Mac, so that one's kind of out, in the unknown. The next thing that's going to be really important is that if you're attempting to run this server on a Windows 10 computer and you expect to use that same computer to test the server with your Minecraft client, then you're going to need to run this command in PowerShell. They've been kind enough to provide it in a little troubleshooting section down here, but this is a real simple copy and paste, and they include the instructions for how to do it right here. I'm not going to go through the process of showing it. I've already done this several times in other videos, but this will make it possible for your Minecraft client to talk to servers on the same machine. Just really important to know that. So make sure that you have .NET Core 2.1 installed and ready to go, and then if you need the loopback exemption command, run that. Once you've got those set up, we're going to go back to AppVeyor. Remember, I linked to this on the other page. Go back to code, or you can click the MiNET link up at the top and click build. That'll take you to AppVeyor. This is a site for helping to compile or put together packages. It takes some of the manual labor off of the developers and maintainers, and does some things that are routine that can be handled by a code or a machine. So whenever you come here, you're able to download artifacts, which are your binaries or your executables, and at the moment these are all being delivered in zip files. So what we're going to do is we're going to download the server, we're going to download the builder base plugin, and we're going to download the test plugin, because I feel like those are definitely going to need attention from almost every server owner. The plotter plugin is intended to be like a plots world plugin that allows players to claim land and build. I haven't really tested this yet. You're welcome to try it out. It should be the same process as the others. If you see down here, I've already got my copies downloaded. You may get a warning when downloading zips like this from Google Chrome or from Edge, Safari, or your other preferred browser, that zip files aren't common for downloads and that these might be dangerous. These particular files I have not had any problems with, so you should be okay with keeping those or trying to use them for what we're doing. So once you've downloaded those, we need to set up a working environment for MiNET. So what I did was I created just a blank empty folder for MiNET to work in, and we're going to create some subfolders. So the first one I'm going to create is called bin, stands for binaries, and we're going to put our server files in this one. So go to where you downloaded your server files and extract all of the server files from that zip folder directly into the bin folder. Once that's done, we're going to create another one called plugins. That should be pretty obvious what we're going to do with this one. So go back to your downloads, and we're going to extract each of the plugins into this folder. Now, I'm going to point this out real quick and try to be kind of clear on this. The name of the folder needs to be changed to whatever the name of the plugin is. So this one was Builder Base, and the next one we're going to do is the test plugin. If you don't, then you will end up overwriting files that may be crucial to how the plugin works, and you'll have potential errors. So best way to avoid that is what we're doing right here. So we rename. This was test plugin. So we've got our plugins. We've got our binaries. Technically at this point we should be able to run the server. I'm going to go ahead and do one other thing, and we're going to create a worlds folder. And in this folder I'm going to put a world file, or a set of world files, for one of the worlds that we're getting ready to do some heavy testing and developing on for We Play BTB, called Fane. And this particular map we got from planetminecraft.com, and we saw a lot of potential with this particular world. It was very well designed and has some very interesting features for one of the concepts, one of the server concepts that we have that we're getting ready to try to get rolling with. We'll have some more information on that later down the road. So we've got our world folder transferred over into our worlds folder. So Fane is the world folder inside of worlds. We've got everything else set up and transferred over. We've got one more thing that we need to take a look at. And on Windows, it's not quite so easy just to up and run the file itself. So we're going to create a batch file. on Linux, you can do the same thing with like a shell script. We're going to run just a basic text document here. We need to make sure to change the extension on this, and this is what's going to be really important. We're going to call this start.bat. You're going to get this little warning to let you know that changing the extension might make the file unstable. That's okay, because we're creating an empty file and we know what's going to happen with that. Then we need to edit this in a text editor. So text editor is up to you as far as what you'd prefer to use. This will work with Notepad or Notepad++ or any various other text editor, but I don't recommend trying to use anything very fancy. It's not required. So the command that we're going to run is .NET space bin/minet.console.dll. It's fairly straightforward. So .NET is the command, and then this is the location of the minet.console DLL that we're going to run, and this is what kickstarts the server for us. We're going to do a quick run real quick to make sure that the server actually starts up and loads. I'm going to show you some of the things about how this gets started and some things that are going to happen, particularly the fact that there are some configurations that need to happen when you first get started. So if you ran everything the way that you were supposed to at the beginning and you're running all of your loopback tests and stuff, then you should get this show up in your Minecraft client. So you can see that we're running the MiNET Server basic standard, and if we try to load in, we're probably just going to get a blank flat world because it doesn't know where our world folder is or where any of our plugins are, and we're not going to have access to any other commands or anything. So this is one of the other benefits that was really significant. A lot of players are seeking this on PocketMine, and it's just there's not really a good solution for mobs yet. There are a couple plugins that are working on it, but nothing that's really fantastic at the moment. But MiNET seems to do okay with it for the moment. So the other thing is, if we try to run any commands, you see we don't really have any commands at the moment, and the world is just a blank flat world. So we're going to leave out of this for a minute. We're going to go back and take a look at the server. We're going to stop the server. You'll see it disappear out of here in just a second. But we're going to edit the configuration file for the MiNET server to do some particular things. We're going to point it to our plugins folder. We're going to point it towards our world folder, and we'll look at some of the other changes that are available there. So in your configuration file, if we go to the bin folder that we created, in here you're going to have server.conf, and if you open that up, you'll have to right click on it and edit it with whatever your preferred text editor is. This will work again with Notepad or with Notepad++ or something similar. But there are a number of things that aren't available in the default configuration file that you can add that server owners may find helpful. And there are also some other things that might not necessarily be as obvious as to what you can do with them. So I mentioned that we were going to point the MiNET configuration to the world files. So this was at dminet/worlds/fane. And then in our plugin directory is currently pointed to where it would expect for the plugins to be if we were running the way that the wiki suggested getting started, by running from a copy of source. So this was at MiNET folder/plugins. Notice that I'm not trying to point to each of the independent plugins in that folder. I'm just pointing to the plugins folder itself. MiNET will actually find all of the plugins that are in that and will load them on its own. It doesn't have to be pointed to each one individually like it was previously, where they were located in various different folders in the source code. The next thing that's important to look at is making sure that the plugins we want to use are enabled. So core commands, we're going to enable core commands because this offers some of the really important commands that most server owners are going to expect to have available to them at some point. I don't recommend leaving these enabled once you go to full production or where you've released the server, but it's good for getting started. So we change this to true. And then same thing for Builder Base. We're going to turn this plugin on. This offers all of our world edit tools that are available from the MiNET developers. So we save that, and then we're going to go back and we're going to run our command again. Just come back to the MiNET folder and run the batch file. You're going to get your server running again. The difference is this time we should have the world loaded the way that we expected it to be before, or the way that we would have wanted it to have been before, and our plugins should be loaded and enabled, or at least the important ones. So we can see the MiNET server has come back up. We can already tell this is not the same world we were in before. And we got a little sneak peek here at the Fane world. And you should see already I've got some items in my inventory that were not there before. We have a distance wand, teleport tool, sphere brush, melt brush, and a fill brush. And then if we attempt to do a command, you can see I now have a list of commands that are available, whereas before I didn't have anything other than help and mixer. So we can teleport to a location. I'm going to show you one of my personal favorites to show off on this area. We are fairly close here to a little village, and this is one of the places where if you're using PocketMon, and I think Nuke is the same, if you're using Java worlds and you're trying to load in something that's as complex as something like this, your half slabs and some of the other blocks that are being used here would not show up properly. They would have shown up as things like command blocks or rails, and we can see that MiNET handled this beautifully, loading without any problem. So something else that I'd like to kind of demo real quick. I'm going to go back to where our spawn point is real quick and just make a quick edit. One of the features that I did not modify, or the configuration files that I didn't change the setting for, was saving the world. And by default, MiNET does not save anything that happens in the world. So if I come down here and break all this stuff, that's pretty destructive, and then leave out of the world, give it a few minutes or a few seconds or so for it to do its thing, finish unloading chunks and whatever, and then we go back in and take a look. MiNET will not have saved any of those changes. Apparently I didn't wait long enough. I'm going to shut the server down real quick, force it to unload those chunks and load them back up. You can see that it didn't save any of the edits that I did when it unloaded the world. So that's something that when you get started as a server owner might be really important to keep in mind. If you're going to start making edits and trying to build like your lobbies or your arenas, game platforms, game modes, whatever, it's really important to remember that your edits are not going to stay if you don't enable the save feature for your worlds. So I'm going to go through a couple of those little things real quick as well. I'm going to show you that one first. I'm going to show you a couple of other things with it. So saving, to be able to save changes, that's this option right here, save enabled equals true. It's commented out by default in the original configuration file. If you just delete that little hashtag right at the beginning, that will make it possible for the world to save. The other part of this is that your save interval and unload intervals will be important here. I believe these are in minutes. Some other things that are important is that you can modify some of the in-game rules by making some changes up through here. Additionally, there are other game rules that are available that are not listed in the configuration file, as well as a couple of other server settings that would be important to server owners. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of those real quick. But first off, let me show you some of the game rules that were important. So you see in the file here that we've got do mob spawning, do daylight cycle, keep inventory. So if we come back into the game and we look at the commands that were given to us and look for game rules, it shows us the available game rules in MiNET using the test plugin core commands extension that we've got loaded. So we could actually take any of these and load those in to our configuration file and turn these on or off by default through the configuration instead of having to run a command in game for these things. Some examples that might be important would be things like do tile drops, do weather cycles, fall damage, mob griefing. Show coordinates is one of the ones that was important for me getting started, because you see every time I've loaded in, my position shows up in the top left hand corner. So it would be really easy just to add game rule show coordinates equals false, and then you stop the server, and load it back up. This again, the coordinates should be gone. Yep. The other thing is that if we make any edits to the world at this point now, they should save. So see, broke the glowstone stuff around this little starting square. We'll save and quit and then force the server to unload. And start it back up. And this time we should see that the changes were saved because we changed that rule in the configuration file. So we can see already those blocks that I broke are obviously not there anymore. That change did get saved when the server shut down. So that's just the real quick and straightforward of doing it. There's a couple of other things I'm going to point out real quick. If you're running multiple copies of the MiNET server or any other Minecraft server for that matter, one of the things that may be important would be your port number. Right now we're running on the default settings, which is binding to all IP addresses on port number 19132. So if you wanted to change that, anywhere in the configuration file you can add IP equals and then whatever IP address you wanted to bind to, or you could add port equals and whatever port number you needed to bind to. So the default is 19132. We could do 19133 or whatever number you wanted to choose for your default port number, so long as the client that you were running this on, or whatever platform you were running this on, didn't have that port firewalled so that traffic couldn't see that port number. But those I feel are some of the most significant and important things about running the MiNET server for most people that are getting started and don't know anything about it. So again, just a real quick run through of the things that were important. We downloaded all of our binary files directly from AppVeyor instead of trying to get them from source and compile them ourselves. By doing this, we have a version number that we can track and submit issues on, and then we created our own lightweight little file structure. We have a bin folder where we're putting our server, plugins folder for plugins, worlds for worlds, and then we created a little quick and easy startup batch file that will start the server for us. And we made some changes in the server's configuration file. Particularly, we pointed out the fact that we can add in specific IP addresses and specific port numbers. You can change things like your message of the day, and that there are some things that are not listed directly in the configuration file that are really important to pay attention to, or that may be helpful. Things like having the game rule for show coordinates, which is not listed already by default. You can turn that on and off by adding some of those game rules, and hopefully as things go on a little further down the road, the documentation for MiNET will start to include these things, and maybe the default configuration files will start having these options already built in. A couple of the other things we did was we made sure to change the option for PC World folder and the plugin directory to point to our MiNET server's files instead of at the default locations, which were not going to work, and we made sure to enable the plugins that we needed. By doing those things, we did have a much more usable server. There were some things that we were able to do that we couldn't do before. But in general, that leaves you with a very solid working server and a good setup for being able to upgrade your server software as MiNET continues to develop and become better, and the ability to make changes to what plugins are loaded and not loaded very quickly without having to try to hunt through a bunch of different files and folders. So if you guys have got any questions or comments on this, feel free to leave them in the section below. I'll do my best to answer where I can. Thanks for watching.